Hi, I'm Snez, personal trainer, healthy lifestyle coach, and your guide to feeling your best. This podcast is a segment from my weekly radio show, Wellbeing Wednesdays, broadcast live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. It's all about sharing real, practical tips to help you move more, eat better, and live healthier without the overwhelm. Let's dive in, shall we? Coming up, I'm super excited and annoyed with myself that it's taken this long in 2025 to get Dr. Kez and Em from Dr. Kez ChiroLab. They're here to help us unpack why does everything ache as we get older, and especially as there's hormonal changes. But Dr. Kez and Em are helping people to live their best healthy lives, and that philosophy is at the heart of everything that they do. At the Dr. Kez ChiroLab, they work to spread their knowledge to support the healing and long-term health of our community with videos, live chats, tips and products so you can help your health at home. Dr. Kez, Doctor of Chiropractic, and her wife Em are passionate about health, well-being and life balance. And Dr. Kez has over 20 years, although she's telling me 25 years of clinical experience. They believe that through nurturing, encouragement and a better understanding of how to take control of your own health, pain management, body balance, energy and motivation, you can be the best version of yourself possible. Welcome to the show, Kez and Em.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. It's lovely to have you back.
Be back.
And there's lots of very excited people knowing that you're back today and listening in today.
Excellent.
Especially on this topic. But I don't know why it's taken us this long to catch up in 2025. It does get busy, and I think we've arrived in May, almost in May now, and I'm not really sure how we got here.
No, I don't know either. Blinked and all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'm still like packing away the Christmas tree. No, I'm not, but that's what it feels like. Sure okay, so the topic for today is hormones and joints and what's really going on in midlife. And Dr. Kez, I'm going to start with the basics. What exactly is happening to a woman's body? We're going to start with women during perimenopause and menopause from a hormonal and a structural perspective. And is it causing pain? Because I'm speaking to lots of women experiencing it myself. Let's lead us in.
Let's start with some definitions so that we understand where we're at. So when it comes to menopause, there is a definition of menopause which comes about relating to our childbearing years. So once we have stopped our menstrual cycle for 12 months, technically we have reached menopause. It's literally a date in time. It's one day, we're there 12 months after our last period, and then from then on we're in post-menopause. Up until that point, when our cycle becomes a little bit erratic, it might be longer, shorter, longer delays in between, it's perimenopause. But basically what's happening is our ovaries, which are an organ in our body designed to produce adequate amounts of estrogen to allow the fluctuations that happened to be able to go through the process of childbearing, they start to go into retirement. So our ovaries are an organ that we don't need for the entirety of our lives. We only require them during the childbearing years. So over time, as a woman, we're actually built with a certain, or born with a certain number of eggs. Once we've released all of those eggs, we no longer require our reproductive system function. We can't fall pregnant, and therefore we go into, or the ovaries go into retirement and they shut up shop. And this is good, because if we continued to be in the childbearing capacity, we'd potentially have 92-year-olds walking around trying to rear children, which would be ridiculous. So,
but isn't that amazing? Like that whole process.
Very clever.
It's so extraordinary that we do that.
It is very clever. In fact, I'm so grateful when I look at the cascade of hormones that go about to create a cycle every month. I'm so grateful that we don't need to think about that, because I'd mess something up. It's so intricate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is what happens. So our ovaries start to slow down. And so it's almost like going part-time at work. You know, instead of working 5 days a week, they start to work maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And so we start to see these changes as a result of less and less estrogen. So there are lots of hormones related to our cycle, but the one that causes particular issues when we're talking about joint health and aches and pains is estrogen. And the reason for that is because we have estrogen receptors all over our body. We often think of estrogen as a reproductive hormone, and yes, it's very important for that, but it is involved in our joints, our muscles, it's involved in our bones. It is everywhere.
In our brain,
skin
which is what I
cell,
learnt about recently.
Our hypothalamus requires
Yeah.
it, absolutely. So all of these areas still require estrogen for the rest of our lives. So even though the ovaries shut up shop and they go into retirement and stop functioning, we still require estrogen to function, and that's where our adrenal glands kick in. And they
right.
will start to produce estrogen for us. And only
Okay.
a small amount of estrogen, because we don't need heaps, which is what we need for reproductive function, but we need enough to cater for all of those other estrogen receptors in our body.
Right. Wow. So because that was going to be my question, being the listeners at home is like, well, if we're still needing this, where does it come from and how does it all happen?
Yeah, so this is what we would like in a normal, healthy, functioning body. This is what would happen. The adrenal glands would kick in and take over. Difficulty is there's a couple of issues with that, because we have seen people go through menopause that cruise through, and I know a lot of women want to push them off a cliff, but it does happen to some people where they do smooth, one of them. smooth into, just glide into menopause without a problem. And that's when their adrenal glands are coping. But for a lot of people, we've been on some sort of chemical hormone. So whether it's been on a pill or an intrauterine device or something like that, or, you know, some of these phytochemicals that are found in foods and plastics and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So our body requires, our threshold has been raised, and our body requires more estrogen to be able to cater for all of these receptors that are in our body. So the other thing to consider too is the adrenal glands are responsible for stress hormone release. So if you're in a state of stress, which a lot of people are at the moment, and that's to do with, you know,
lots
the way
of reasons.
lots of reasons, then our adrenal glands will prioritise cortisol and adrenaline, keeping us safe, fight or flight response, over producing estrogen.
Right.
So if you are somebody who is in a constant state of stress, worrying about this or worrying about that, then you will find that your ability to produce estrogen from the adrenal glands is diminished, because it's prioritising the safety. Our body's design is to make sure we stay safe all the time.
And that's an interesting time in our lives where, as women of this age, our lives are speeding up almost, and there is more stress because we're dealing potentially with teenage kids or higher positions in our workplaces or elderly parents. Like, it's a challenging time.
Highly stressful time. Yeah. So the body's got a fallback plan to that, which is really good. And that is, we lay down fat, because fat produces estrogen.
Right.
So now you're putting two and two together, right? All of a sudden, we've got all these people that come to us and say, I'm going through perimenopause, apart from the fact that I can't think clearly, I can't sleep properly, my skin's dry, I'm having hot flushes. All of a sudden they go, I've got all this extra weight that I just can't shift. Previously I've been able to do it with exercise or modifying what I eat, but what I used to do and what used to work is no longer working.
Yeah.
Because the body is laying down adipose tissue or fat tissue for a purpose. It is producing enough estrogen for us to try and cater with all these receptors that are floating around our body. So all of a sudden we struggle to shift it because it's there for a reason.
And it has purpose. There's a function, and the body will not let go of things that has function.
100%.
Wow. That was a gap that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
So we spoke on the phone the other day, and I said I've been learning a lot about menopause and going through, you know, the whole process and working with lots of women, but that was a little bit of a gap that's really fascinating.
It's not a well-known fact.
And that obviously directs where we're putting down body fat. Is that also leading to visceral? Is that sort of more likely?
Yeah, visceral and central. So that's why we end up with it around our tummies and our hips, because that's where our body is finding it easier to produce the estrogen from.
So now that we know that, and I'm sort of, again, the listener's voice and just going, okay, so we know this. So theoretically, we just need to be less stressed.
100%.
So then our adrenals can do what they need to do, and then our body doesn't need to compensate by building more fat.
Absolutely. That is a huge, huge factor in this.
Wow.
Let's think about that realistically, though, for a minute.
Exactly.
Yeah? You've just mentioned teenagers, different stresses in jobs, and potentially elderly parents and things of that nature. The reality, unfortunately, there are lots of different tools for reducing stress, but the reality is the continuous nature of stress often leaves us in a situation where we really do struggle to to be able to allow the adrenal glands to get a true rest and therefore start to produce adequate amounts of estrogen.
Yeah.
And this is something that Em and I have been battling with for a long time. We weren't in the state of perimenopause at the time of having many of our community members come to us with this exact problem.
Yeah.
What is going on for us? And we're like, well, we're not there yet, so let's explore into this, do more research, and this is what we've worked out. And so as a result of that, we've developed a product that can fill the gap so that we've got natural, not synthetic. So there are things like hormone replacement therapy, which bombards your body with estrogen, whether you need that dose or not. You've got to be very careful of synthetically made products. But in nature, the ability to take something that is what we call a phytoestrogen, so basically the next step before your body tips it over into estrogen.
They're plant-based.
Correct.
Plant-based estrogens,
So your body can then move it into estrogen if it needs it. If it doesn't need it, it won't do it. It'll just allow you to do what your body needs. And that's what I love about natural products is, you know, apart from the multi-pharmaceutical nature of all herbs and minerals, is that they've got that ability to help with this or this or this. And when your body requires it, they take what they need and then they do what they need with it.
Which is just fantastic. And you did mention that in the earlier days when you weren't going through the process that you didn't really know what information to offer, but also I don't think there was as much information back then. We were talking about that off air, is we're really starting to learn a lot more about this phase in life and starting to recognise some of the symptoms because there's so many as well.
Absolutely. It is the information era at the moment. We have got information at our fingertips, and I think having a knowledge of the body and being able to piece things together, often information comes about in a form that when I get to read it, because I understand the physiology of the body and how the body works, I can actually put into place and then research other things to say, okay, if that's functioning, then what's happening with the adrenal glands? And if the adrenal glands can't do it, what happens to the body? And then we've worked out this whole system, which I've just explained, that seems to make a whole lot of sense to people that are going through that same process. Because like you say, there are so many symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. A lot of people don't even realise that they're in perimenopause if they've never heard it before. They're like, what's happening to my body?
And sometimes the help that we can access isn't recognising the symptoms as well, or don't really have an answer for it. And I'm super keen to hear a little bit more about phytoestrogens, and we might tack that on to the end. But I'm going to just ask you one more question, then we'll need to go into a break. But so many women are reporting joint pain and stiffness as they hit their 40s and their 50s. So what's the link between that declining estrogen and the joint health? Like, is there a link there?
100%. So the estrogen receptors are found in our joints. They're found in the articular cartilage, which is between the two bones. And as a result of that, if you can imagine, Em was describing it really well on the way here in the car, if you can imagine a wet cake of soap and how lubricating and smooth it is against your skin, that's when we've got heaps of estrogen. When we don't have enough estrogen to fill those receptors in the cartilage, it becomes like a dry cake of soap that you can imagine trying to rub that on to a dry skin. It would be really uncomfortable. So if you can imagine a joint with lubrication, comfortable joint, moving, no problem at all, but if it starts to dry up, then you get that stiffness, you get that discomfort, you get development of arthritis, those sorts of conditions, which as we age, we think it's normal. We think that's just what happens. It's not. We've now realised there's a way to be able to prevent these things from happening and to be able to allow ourselves to continue to be fully mobile right through to the rest of our life.
Yeah, and that's quite a new concept, isn't it?
100%.
That concept of being able to function at a certain level and then decline towards the end of our lives rather than having a steady decline from the age of 40, which is what we tend to think is happening now, and that doesn't really need to be the case.
No, very true. But as you mentioned before, we're under more time pressures and more emotional pressures, etc. And I think generally speaking, women of that age, particularly if they're mums, have got the tendency to put themselves at the very bottom of the list. So prioritising moving their body or doing something that's going to make them function better tends to be something that's left to the last minute, and often, you know, you get to the end of the day and you don't have time for it. So it's such a priority. So for us to be the best that we can be in our family, for our partner, for our work, we need to prioritise ourselves so that our vehicle, our body, is capable of doing what it is that we need to do for everyone everyone around us.
And it's also up until that point, we've just given so much to everybody else. We want to have a time where we can arrive for ourselves and do the things that we want to do and take time for ourselves. And it is that time as our kids get older and we move on in our lives, but we want to be able to be in the best health that we can at this age. So it's so special to be talking to you today. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. We're going to move into not only the joints affected, but are the muscles and tendons and ligaments also affected that may be contributing to this joint pain. Stick around. I'm with Dr. Kez and Em from ChiroLab. Welcome back. We're talking about menopause, perimenopause, menopause, the changes, in particular, what are some of the aches and pains that come as a result of this change in our lives as women. However, you've just dropped that big bombshell on us about the cause, the primary cause of that weight gain that we don't want at this age. And I'm going to steer the conversation in the direction of joint pain and what we can do about it. But we are going to address this. And you were talking about in the break just making some minor tweaks because life's full on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so busy, and sometimes when you're bombarded with too much stuff, you just think, oh, it's all too hard.
And you mentioned something before. I'd like you to repeat it for me because I want to remember so we can go back to it. But about routines, you said turn it into
our daily routines that we do every day and just turn it into a therapeutic one. So if it's something that we do every day, like putting on a body lotion, then let's put on something that's actually going to do something for our body. Just little things like that help us every day to live a better, healthier life.
Yeah, that's really clever and really powerful because it's not adding anything.
No,
You're just evolving, I guess, for this stage in life.
Your toothpaste flutter.
Yes, I love that because we just feel like, I don't know, we feel like we have to make these astronomical changes because that's how it feels in our body. But I'm really keen to unpack some of the things that we can do. But just moving ahead with the joint pain. Now, we were talking about, and you explained the reason for the joint pain before the break. Does that just affect joints or is it affecting our muscles and tendons and ligaments as well?
Yeah, believe it or not, estrogen receptors are everywhere. Muscles, ligaments, tendons, in the articular cartilage that's in between our joints. It's even in our hypothalamus. They are everywhere. So it really does affect everything. And as we get, if you can remember back to the idea of the hydration with estrogen being present and being able to fill those receptors and getting that nice slippery soap feel rather than a dried up sort of experience, if you can imagine that in your mind. If you're thinking about muscles that surround a joint, if they're tight and dry and not being fed with these estrogen with the receptors, you'll find that you'll get tightness of the joints. And previously we've had a chat with you about how when muscles are tight, they jam joints together. And that's when we start to see deterioration of the cartilage, which leads to potentially leads to osteoarthritis, which is a form of arthritis. We call it wear and tear arthritis, which results in pain. It results in inflammation. It results in joint stiffness. And so all of a sudden, the thought of actually going and moving our body is something that we don't want to do because it's uncomfortable. Yet if we can help provide the solution as to how to replenish the estrogen, so we rehydrate the muscles and the ligaments and the tendons and the capsules and all of those functioning aspects of the joint, you'll find that movement is comfortable again, and therefore we can do it because the more you move it, the more lubricated it will then become. So it's a bit of a catch-22. If there's no estrogen, it's dry and you don't want to move it.
Which is contributing to the problem then.
Exactly. Whereas if we can hydrate and make sure that our joints are functioning properly by then moving them, we're doing things like we're improving lymphatic return, which prevents sort of swelling that happens in our hands and our feet, and we're helping with the blood, we're helping with all sorts of different nutrition through to the joint as well. So moving our body is important, but I can imagine people out there with arthritis or when they're very heavily deficient in estrogen going through menopause or perimenopause or postmenopause even, is that they don't want to move their joints. The thought of that, they're thinking, Kez, you're kidding me, I'm not going to do that. It hurts. It actually hurts to do that. So we can help to work through that so that you feel like moving again. And even if you don't feel like moving, it means when you go to the shops and you do walk around, it's not uncomfortable anymore. Being able to do those daily things without discomfort is really important.
And I really love how you've explained all of that because I know that but even sometimes soreness can come up that didn't even exist before. And as we get older, we can't really connect the dots to what we've done because we try and connect it to, we've done this or we're sitting for long periods of time, but sometimes we can't even connect what we're doing differently that now we're feeling this discomfort. And so it's so great for you to explain that link and also know that there's things that we can do about it. I do have a question though. Is there specific areas that are more prone to pain and dysfunction, like when those estrogen levels drop, or is it just all round?
It is all around, but we do tend to notice it more in the joints that we use the most. So if I could pick certain joints, it would probably be hips, knees and shoulders because we use them. So hips and knees being weight bearing, and shoulders because we move them and use them so much. So if you've got a dryish joint, the more you move it, the more uncomfortable it will become. So we tend to notice it in those areas. And spine is another area that we have that tendency to notice developing arthritis and things like that. And although those joints don't move as much as the others that I've mentioned, they definitely take a lot of the weight bearing because you're constantly in sort of weight bearing with those types of areas. So those are the areas that you would probably notice it the most.
Yeah, which makes sense because we see frozen shoulders and things like that. And I get that a lot. That
in clinical practice. Yep, me too.
Absolutely, where they'll just say, I don't know what I did differently. I just moved one day, and you're just like, well, understanding it from this perspective now. But let's move into what I think the listeners would be really wanting to hear is can we do about this? Now, from what I can hear, what you're telling me, it is really an issue about estrogen.
It is.
And the drop in estrogen. So is the solution then replacing estrogen, or is the solution, what is the solution? I'm going to hand it over to you. What can we do to help ourselves feel less discomfort or feel less of these symptoms?
So absolutely. You touched on something that's really pertinent before about reducing stress. So if we can help the adrenal glands to produce estrogen as a priority over our cortisol or our adrenaline, because we're not in that fight or flight response all the time. Don't get me wrong, if something happens that causes stress, we want the body to transfer over to producing that. That is one big step that you can help with. But replacing naturally, we're all into natural things, replacing estrogen naturally in the body is what we would recommend that you do. And we have found the best way to do that. There's actually a naturally produced product called Wild Yam, which has a product in it called diastenin. Diastenin is a phytoestrogen, and it's something that the body can take in. We do it topically, so that means rubbing it on the skin. And as Em said, if you can replace something that you do on a regular basis, you put lotion onto your body, if you replace that with something therapeutic, you're not, as you said, you're not changing anything, you're just adding.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
So that will then allow this product diastenin, this phytoestrogen, to go into your body, which the adrenal glands take. It's no hassle for the adrenal glands to tip it over into estrogen if it needs to. Just one little chemical reaction and over it goes, estrogen aplenty. So all of a sudden you've got plenty of estrogen floating around to cater for all these receptors that you find in your body, rehydrating all of your joints, which makes it easier for you to then move your body, go out and do what you need to do. Because the reality is, something that we haven't touched on, is as we age, as men and women, the risk of sarcopenia, which is a decrease in muscle mass and strength, happens naturally as a decline. If we don't move it, we lose it, literally, as well as bone density concerns, so osteopenia and osteoporosis. So if we're not moving our body actively and lifting some sort of weight-bearing, weight that we're lifting, not just physically moving our bodies around, but potentially lifting as well, we will then potentially see declines in these areas of our body as well, which can lead to falls, balance issues, broken bones, those sorts of things. So we need to make sure that we can replace the estrogen so that we do feel comfortable going about doing some weight-bearing exercise, so that we can then get the muscles to pull on the bones, demands the bone to lay down stronger trabeculae, so all of a sudden we don't have bone density issues.
Yeah, because I guess that's a really important point to touch on, and I just wanted to unpack this a little bit further, is that the lack of or the reduction of estrogen as we go through this phase is definitely contributing. But there's also just the aging process that is causing change as well. And so it's great that you touched on that, because a lot of the times I think as women in this phase in life, we can just think, just replace the estrogen and then everything is fixed, which that's a part of the solution that you've addressed in terms of weight bearing is another big component of that, because that aging process that's common to men and women is still occurring.
Absolutely, it is. And interesting that you mention men at this stage, because men also have estrogen receptors. I know that there's a bit of a misconception out there that estrogen is a women's hormone. It's not. We all have these estrogen receptors in our muscles, in our ligaments, in our joints, etc. So men are affected by a decline in estrogen as well, which can come about from this issue with stress. So men don't have ovaries. That is a true fact.
So they don't have that huge dip that we do.
No, that's right. They do go through andropause, which is a bit of a testosterone drop. But anyway, that's another topic.
Yeah,
but,
another show.
Yeah, but it is definitely noticeable as they go through stresses in their life where they will find that they've got a decline in estrogen because the adrenal glands are busy producing stress hormones, that they then feel those same issues. So replacing estrogen is a factor for both men and for women. It's just that we notice it so much more because of the fact that we have had so much in our body for such a long time that all of a sudden it literally drops off a cliff, and all of a sudden you get all these terrible symptoms. You can't sleep because you're waking up in the sweats, and you've got to get up in the middle of the night and go to the toilet because your bladder can't cope. So many symptoms that then create poor quality of life for us in general. We know how important sleep is, and if you're up 2 or 3 times a night because you need to use the bathroom, you're not repairing and regenerating your body. All those sorts of changes that we need are not happening properly.
And something that I know Em particularly loves talking about as well is that when we're talking about stress, like we sort of alluded to, family and life events, but I always like to talk about nutritional stress and stress that comes from eating foods that are putting extra stress on us. Would you say that's a big part of stress?
I mean, the high processed foods that are available these days, it's become people's lifestyle to just grab, these poor food choices, and it really does make a difference to how your body reacts. So I think eating, as clean as we can, whole foods, fruits and vegetables and healthy proteins, just as clean as we can, and it really does make a difference in how our bodies react as we go through menopause.
And I think that's the change that definitely needs to happen. We're talking a lot about education off air. Like I think Dr. Kez and I were getting really excited that education is so powerful, and I think we really align in that way, because I'm a big believer of education, very passionate about education. But I think this is the stage in life where we need to learn. We need to learn about ourselves. We need to learn about what we genuinely need through food, through reducing stress, and how can we do it? Because, I mean, the risk is that we can still continue going on through our lives, but we're not going to be able to embrace and fully enjoy our senior years as best as we probably could. And I think we all really deserve to enjoy and embrace fully.
Oh, certainly we do. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that Em often talks about with sort of preservatives and foods like that links to joint health is how sugary foods and preserved foods can significantly increase the inflammation in our body, which makes joint health really noticeable. Like you mentioned, things that weren't ailing before all of a sudden become quite uncomfortable when you've got that, what we call like a pro-inflammatory state happening in our bodies. If our bodies are trying to digest foods that aren't natural and our body's not supposed to be consuming them, all of a sudden we have this reaction that it takes nothing to tip us over the edge to get inflammation in all of our joints, and we then end up even in a worse state than we were before. So many contributing factors to this. Absolutely.
And I don't know if people really realise the impact until they make the change and just go, wow, like you probably see it all the time.
Absolutely. How much different people feel, because as Em says, you don't know what you don't know.
And once you know how good you can feel, then you might have a cheat day where you just eat whatever, and all of a sudden you feel tired and achy, and it's just like your body can't cope. You just want to go and have a lay down.
Yeah, and I always say, like, when there's times like that, I'll just say to the kids, remind me never to do that again. Yeah. Like, it's just that, you know what, I'm done with that. But let's talk about prevention, and then we'll finish off on what we can do now. But let's talk about prevention and women that may be listening in their 30s or early 40s. What can they do now to protect themselves from joint and musculoskeletal health later on in life, or that pain, or even that change in estrogen levels? What can they do? Is there anything that they can do?
Well, I think the best gift that we can give ourselves is recognising that we as a person, whether that person, we wear many different hats as a mum and as a partner and as somebody who works, blah, blah, blah. I think we need to prioritise ourselves in that we put ourselves first frequently, so that we can be in a situation where we're not entering that stage of our life in stress, in crisis mode, so that when the transition happens, it can happen with, as Em says, if you're eating well, your body's got the resources it needs to transition smoothly through menopause. It doesn't need to all of a sudden have this, oh my goodness, my adrenal glands are too busy creating stress hormones, or I've never done any exercise, or I haven't for 20 years or so. Yeah. If you're moving your body, you're eating well, and you're already in that state where you recognise what works for you to reduce stress, and you've got systems in place that can assist you, and that you do prioritise yourself without guilt in being able to move your body, go to a gym if you like, or do things that make you feel good and release the stress, then I think you'll find that you'll be one of those people that everybody envies going into menopause because you're just having no symptoms.
And that's really, really good advice. It's not what I thought I was going to hear. It was like, and I think it's more like, Dr. Kez, can you just give me the powder that I need to take?
Sometimes it's not a product. It could be a lifestyle change that makes all the difference.
And that's where I think it's just taking ownership, isn't it, to really make that difference? Because a lot of the time we just sort of go, just give me the supplement or give me the quick fix. But this is really important because it does affect us further down the line. But let's take a quick break. We'll be right back, and we're going to unpack what can we do now that we are in that perimenopause or postmenopause phase. Welcome back. Let's unpack what can people do now. So we're in that nuts perimenopause phase, or we're in the postmenopause phase. What can women do to help themselves feel better? We've already identified that joint pain and muscle discomfort does come with drop in estrogen levels, as well as the natural aging process. But what can we do now to help ourselves?
All right, first things first, we need to hydrate our body. So that means drinking good quality water. So making sure that you're not consuming water that is full of cordial or anything else. So
that's part of the lubricating.
That's it's general health. It's blood flow. There's so much about it. And when it comes to hormones travel via the circulatory system. A little bit different to the nervous system where your brain says something and all of a sudden something reacts immediately. The hormonal system, the brain sends a message to an organ. The organ has to then take the time to produce the hormone. It then releases it into the bloodstream, and then it takes time to float through the body to where it needs to get to find the receptor. It's a very slow process. Yep. We can help to process that well by making sure that there is plenty of hydration so that the
river's
blood's
flowing nicely.
100%. Then those hormones find their wherever their end destination, end organ is a lot easier. The other thing that's really important that we haven't touched on yet is to make sure that your liver is functioning properly. Your liver is an organ that helps to detoxify our body. We've often heard of that, but it also metabolizes hormones, etc., in your body when there's enough of them. So when the brain finally says, we've got enough estrogen, hey, adrenal glands, you can rest for a little bit, we've got plenty. Yep. There is a message that goes through to the liver that says, okay, you can start to metabolize the floating around estrogen because we've got enough of that. Yep. If our liver is busy processing other toxins in our body, it won't do that effectively, and you can potentially end up with an excess of certain hormones in your body. So potentially heard of polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS. Yep. This is an excess of testosterone that's floating around the body.
Right.
Now, my belief in that is that the liver is struggling with trying to detoxify other things in our body because we're exposed to so many pollutants and eating, as Em said before, processors in food, the things that are sprayed on our foods. Our body is so busy trying to protect us from that it struggles to do the job of metabolizing excess hormones in our body. Right. So we end up with these hormonal imbalances, really, which what this is all about. So if we can make sure we nurture our liver to make sure that our liver functions properly and we've got plenty of water floating around in our system, the flow of hormones through our body is going to function at its optimal best. Yep. We then want to replace the estrogen that our poor little adrenal glands are struggling so that our fat cells don't take over the job, so that we've got plenty of the potential, the building block for the body to produce estrogen as it requires it. And then from that point, we will start to see the change in the way our joints function, the suppleness of our muscles and how they pull on our joints. And from that point, we can then start to become less sedentary. We can start to move our body. And as we start to move our body gently, of course, things like yoga and stretching, walking, that sort of thing, when we're not stiff and sore, it becomes quite not only for physical but for mental health as well, quite a good thing to do to be able to help ease both of those things, because then we're covering the mental health side of things as well, so that the adrenal glands aren't busy producing stress hormones. So if we can do that, we can then move on and progress into things like weight-bearing exercise, so whether it's pulling on a resistance band or lifting a weight or something, so that we can demand of our muscles so they get stronger and maintain good strength, which helps us with balance, and it also helps demand on the bone to create good bone density.
And supports those joints.
100%.
And, yeah.
It all interlinks. Yeah.
So we talked about the hydration, which is easy enough, but we talked about bringing some estrogen back in the body. Firstly, we also talked about getting the adrenals to do their work, so reducing stress levels. But how do we get some estrogen back into our body?
So
you did mention wild yam before.
Yeah,
Can I ask about that?
Wild yam is a natural product that we have used in a product of ours to be able to allow phytoestrogens to enter through the skin to be able to let the adrenal glands take what it needs to be able to tip it over. And as I said before, different to a hormone replacement, this is a natural product that won't be given to your body whether you need it or not, whereas that's what HRT does. So you get the dose whether you need it or not, whereas this allows your body to take what it needs and it won't use it if it doesn't need it. So by putting this in a lotion, it's called Hormotion Lotion, or that's our product's name, it will allow your body to absorb the phytoestrogen so that it's floating around. And I say wild yam, there are many other other active ingredients in this that cater for the different aspects, mental health aspects, skin aspects, etc., that happen through perimenopause and menopause. It's just from the perspective of estrogen. Wild yam is the feature ingredient, if you like, that helps to produce.
Okay, so the estrogen is in the wild yam.
It's a phytoestrogen. So it's like a bioequivalent so that the body can take it and utilise it as it needs. And this allows your body to get whatever it requires to replace what the adrenal glands are really struggling to convert. It means it's just easier for it to be able to convert it into estrogen, which then means that your body's got plenty for all your receptors, your muscles, your ligaments, your tendons, joints, etc. And then you can go about starting to move your body in a way that doesn't cause discomfort.
Yeah, which is really fantastic. And I think the pivotal conversation is about estrogen, and it's really great to hear. I haven't heard about wild yam, and I am going to be exploring that and looking into that. But it's really great to know that there is some natural alternatives that we can use. But I guess it's really a message for women to start to explore how they can lift those estrogen levels, because it is really part of the solution at this age, isn't it?
It certainly is, yeah, absolutely. And there is a solution. Please don't think just because you watched your mum or your grandmother go through terrible times during menopause, don't think that's going to be you. There is plenty that you can do, including eating healthier foods that will assist your body to smoothly transition through this phase. You don't have to suffer during menopause. You don't.
Yeah. And that's a really huge take-home message, because we do feel quite alone in this phase. But the fact that there's so much conversation going is really great. But we've only got about 5 minutes before I need to throw to the news. But is there any other advice or just some final words that you would like to give our listeners, both Em and Dr. Kez? I've absolutely loved this interview, by the way. There's been such gems coming out of this, and I think just letting women know that there's a lot that they can do, and also confirming that there's a real reason why all of this is actually happening and the way that they're feeling. But what are some final and concluding bits of advice that you have for us?
Well, I just think it's never too late to start. I mean, a lot of women, they come up and they're like, oh, you know, they think that there's no option, and they just think, I'm too old and I've never exercised. But you're never too late, and don't ever compare yourself to somebody else, especially when it comes to exercise. If you've never done exercise, you know, brisk walk around the block or whatever it is, you know, a few air squats sitting up and down on your couch,
it makes a difference.
Yeah, it all makes a difference. That whole move it all, you know. Use it or lose it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Em often talks about using things that you were doing around the house, like vacuuming or sweeping or mopping, as forms of exercise. Don't be thinking that that's not moving your body, because it is. Put on some music and really get into the groove of doing it. You are moving your joints, and that is something that you can, in your mind, check off the box. Today I've moved my body, and I think that's really important.
Vacuuming up dog hair is hard work.
And you can even I do some really strange things at home. I will share. And we have a long sort of hallway where the kids' bedrooms are on the side, and it kind of ends in our bedroom at the end. And I have been very known to, and the kids will see me walking past, I would just walk on all fours down the hallway. So I'll brush my teeth in a deep squat action, or just things like that. Like if I feel that I've sat still for too long, and this is very different. The movement for me at this age is very different to what I was doing in my 20s and 30s. This is definitely about moving those joints. And if I feel like I've been too sedentary for a day, I feel like I need to move, and it feels good to stretch and lengthen and twist and turn in safe ways. So So, but look, thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough. It's an absolute joy having you in every time. It's always so insightful and inspiring, because you always come in with a solution. There's always something that we can do. And I look forward to hopefully having you back a little bit sooner before the end of the year. Thank you, Dr. Kez and Em from ChiroLab. Thanks for joining me on this segment from Wellbeing Wednesdays, as heard live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who might find it helpful, and subscribe so you never miss a show. Want to catch the live broadcast? Well, you can tune in Wednesdays from 12 till 2 p.m. on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM, or find my info on Wellbeing Wednesdays with Snez, the Facebook group. Take care, stay healthy, and remember, it's the little choices every day that create big changes. Talk soon.